Welcome back to Bedtime Blocks, where every block has a story, and some are better left untold. Tonight's confession is about a painting that didn't just hang on the wall, it showed my death before it happened. But in Minecraft, sometimes the scariest part isn't what's outside your door. It's what's staring at you from inside. So grab a blanket, settle in, and let me tell you exactly what happened when the painting changed. I didn't notice the painting when I logged in. I noticed the sound first, the cabin's quiet timber creak you only hear when every other noise has died, when the furnace is out and the wolves outside have settled and even the leaves sound like they're holding their breath. I'd left the world paused last night with the cabin tidy, torches placed evenly along the spruce walls, a neat line of barrels under the window, my bed tucked against the corner where I could see the door. Nothing fancy, just a survival base with a roof that didn't leak rain. I spun once, checking the usual. Food in hotbar, shield at half durability, iron sword fine for now. That's when my crosshair drifted across the wall and a painting flickered into render, one I swear wasn't hanging there before. It wasn't one of the classic Minecraft paintings you cycle through when you place wool and sticks. It wasn't Donkey Kong, or the skull with the sea, or the matchstick figure doing karate. It was my cabin interior, the angle from the bed, the window, the torches, perfect. And on the floor, right where the rug of white carpet sat in real life, there was a shape with my skin's clothes and my offhand shield dropped just so. The red "You died" message ghosting faintly across the canvas like someone had photographed the exact moment I fell. I stood there for a full slow minute, listening to the non-existent wind, telling myself it was a texture pack glitch, that the game had bugged the painting atlas, but then the torch beside the bed popped once, the light level dipped, and in the painting, the "You died" text pulsed, as if waiting for me to blink first. I did the rational thing. I broke it. One quick punch, the familiar wool rip sound, and the painting popped off into an item. It fell on the rug. My actual rug, not the one in the picture, and I felt better immediately, like I'd slammed a door on a draft. I hovered the cursor over the dropped item just to confirm it was normal. It rotated lazily, the way dropped items do, showing the backboard and the nails and then flipping to its face. And in that split-second face-up flash, I saw my skin again, only this time the pose had changed. The body in the picture was turned a little, the knees bent like it had fallen forward instead of flat. I snatched it before it could spin again. Inventory slot 3, stack 1, name, painting. No lore, no weird enchantment glow, no data tags my UI could see. Fine. I placed it back on the wall with a huff, expecting the usual rotation of classics. It snapped to the same size as before, 2 by 2, and showed a piglin gallery. Relief. I clicked it to cycle. A skull painting. Another click. Fighters. Another click. And then the cabin again. My cabin, except there was a small, dark detail near the bed that I didn't want to zoom in on because I already knew what it was. I took it down again. I walked it outside in my inventory like carrying a live coal, crossed the spruce porch and placed it on a random birch log. It rendered a cheerful view of 2 guys sparring. Okay. Good. It belonged out here, with the breeze that didn't exist and the birds that didn't sing. I turned to go back in, and the door of my cabin in the painting stood open. A darker rectangle inside the already dark room, and the "You died" text was no longer faint. It was crisp white, centered, waiting. I crafted a new painting out of spite, sticks and white wool, because if this was some weird seed quirk, maybe the old one held corrupted data and a fresh craft would behave. I hung the new canvas inside above the barrels. It clicked into place and served up the dojo scene. Click, skull on the beach. Click, view of a withered sunset. It was like the game had exhaled. I left it on a generic sunset and tried to get on with my original plan for the session. Finish the copper roof trim, harvest the wheat, breed cows, maybe check the dripstone cave for iron. I tossed cobble in a chest, tapped the composter, glanced up, and the sunset canvas had been replaced. I didn't hear the placement sound. I don't know when it switched. But there was the cabin again. The bed angle perfect. My red and black skin slumped half off the carpet. I leaned in because there was a detail by the hand. Something gleaming. A drop. An item image. I recognized the texture instantly because I'd repaired it last night. My iron sword. Same durability bar. Same name tag. Hold fast. The picture wasn't predicting a generic death. It was predicting mine down to the pixels I carried in this room, soon enough for the sword to still be exactly as chipped as it was. I backed away like a creeper had hissed, bumped the barrel, opened it, closed it again without thinking. Because what do you do when something in Minecraft points a finger at you and says, "Here, in this room, this is where you end"? I put on armor. Not because iron plates would stop a prophetic painting, but because the sound of sliding into a chest plate steadied me. Helmet, chest plate, leggings, boots, shield up. I did a slow scan. Door closed, trapdoor over the basement ladder shut, windows intact, light levels all safe, no mob spawns. I even hit F3 and stared at the light numbers like a superstition could be cured by data. Everything came back normal. The painting waited. I decided I'd outstubborn it. I took a bedroll, the red one I used when traveling, set it outside under the porch awning, and told myself I'd relocate for a night, work on the roof, sleep under the stars, then come back in with fresh eyes and a shrug. I stepped out, placed a torch on the porch post for comfort, and when I looked back through the window, I caught a reflection. My cabin interior doubled faintly on the glass, the painting inside staring out, and over my shoulder in the reflection, there was a second window, one I hadn't placed, hanging in thin air behind me like a frame looking at a frame. I spun, sword up. Nothing behind me but spruce and the wheat patch. I swallowed the copper taste of adrenaline that Minecraft shouldn't be able to give, walked back inside, and broke every window pane and replaced them just to feel like I was changing variables. The painting didn't care. In it, my body lay halfway under the bed now, as if whoever I was in the picture had tried to crawl and hadn't made it. I tried science. I placed an item frame, set it beside the painting, and put my sword in the frame so I could compare the durability notch with the one in the canvas. The two matched perfectly, the missing green sliver identical, like the painting was reading my hotbar. I swapped the sword for a stone axe. The painting updated. The item on the floor beside the body was no longer the sword. It was a stone axe with the same pathetic notch. I yanked the axe back out of the frame with a hiss through my teeth. I took off my helmet. The body on the canvas had bare hair. I put the helmet back on. The body's helmet reappeared. There was no delay. It was mirroring, but not a mirror, more like a copy that wrote from the end. And then I noticed the clock. I didn't own a clock in this world yet. I hadn't found enough gold early, and I never bothered later. But in the painting, on the wall above the barrel that holds my leather, a clock ticked. It showed a narrow sliver of dusk, the yellow sun icon kissing the edge where the red moon circle begins. The exact kind of evening where you think you have a minute to finish a chore and a skeleton spawns behind the tree. I checked the real sky through my replacement windows. Afternoon, still bright. The painting was running ahead of me, fast-forwarded just far enough to make me stupid enough to follow. If the picture wanted me in the room at dusk, I would be anywhere else. I packed a quick run kit, bread, torches, a stack of deep slate for panic towers, and told myself I'd fish on the dock until sunrise. I took one last look at the canvas to flip it to a harmless scene before leaving. I punched it, caught it, placed it again, clicked through the images faster than my nerves. Fighters, pig, skull, the big kebab piece, sunset, the little plant. I stopped on the plant and made myself stare at it until my heart slowed. Then I reached for the door. The handle didn't move. I didn't misclick. I heard the distinctive thud of a door right-click that fails because something is on the other side occupying the space. I peered through the window next to it, angling pixels, but the porch looked empty, just the torch I'd set and the edge of the wheat patch. I broke the door block with my pick. It popped, dropped as oak door items, like always, clattered on the porch. I stepped forward into the doorway and smacked face first into an invisible, unbreakable block. The game didn't show barrier particles. There were none. But my sprint stuttered like I'd hit a fence. I tried to place the door back. It refused to occupy the space, as if the cell were already filled. I put my ear, figuratively, to the gap and listened. The porch torch crackled, the forest breathed, and in the painting on the wall behind me, my body lay a little closer to the bed, the clock now solidly in night. I went for the trap door. If I couldn't leave through the front, I'd go down into the tiny basement storage where I kept spare stone and a useless copper block I never knew what to do with. Maybe the path under the porch would let me dig out, a sidestep. I flipped the trapdoor and started down the ladder, feeling the relief of agency return, in a simple rhythm of block, rung, block. I reached the compact room, 6x3, torches bright, chest in the corner. I dug a tunnel toward the hill's outside edge, counting blocks like a mantra. 5, 6, 7. Cooler air as the light fell behind me. At 9, my pick hit something that trod a different pitch entirely, like knocking on glass in a stone house. I broke the block. Behind it was nothing, not a cave, not a slice of night. An actual stretch of black that didn't render movement or fog, like the game refused to load beyond. I flicked a torch into the gap. It hovered for a second, light radius blooming, and then the light shut off while the torch remained in place, its particle freeze-framed, suspended mid-air like a screenshot. I reached in with my cursor to take it back. The crosshair refused to select it, skidding over the edge as if the world ended there. I stacked stone to block it and breathed at the ladder base until my hands stopped pressing keys too hard. When I climbed back up, the trapdoor wouldn't close. I clicked and clicked, and it kept flipping to open again, as if fingers I couldn't see held it from below. The painting was waiting for me, like a teacher who already knows the answer you're going to give. Now, the angle inside the image had shifted. Instead of the bed shot, it showed the doorway from the inside, the same invisible block filling the frame, the porch torch burning with an exaggerated too-steady halo. And there, ghosted faintly just within the threshold, was a shape that matched my height exactly. No eyes, no mouth, no detail, just a silhouette as if someone had removed all texture data and left the bounding box of a player. It was leaning inward a degree, the way you lean when your name is called. I took off the painting with a snarl, tossed it in a chest, and the chest made a wet, wrong sound, like opening a door underwater. I backed away. The chest lid stayed ajar in a way chests don't. The canvas blinked back onto the wall by itself, with the soft clap of a placed block, orienting without my input, slightly crooked, as if placed by a hand unfamiliar with my wall. I didn't touch it again. Instead, I snapped into maintenance mode, water bucket in hotbar, bed destroyed so I wouldn't respawn in the cabin if something killed me. I set a new bed out in the wheat and right-clicked to reset spawn there. I typed /seed reflexively and got the seed number I'd memorized. Nothing altered there, no players online. Single-player world. My mic was off and my door was real-life locked, which shouldn't matter, and yet it did. Night came outside, the real night, not the one in the painting, and with it that muted hush Minecraft has, as if it's holding a match under your chin and waiting to see if you'll flinch. The first knock was quiet enough that I thought I'd imagined it, a hollow little tap-tap on wood that could have been a leaf block dropping a stick. I told myself it was a leaf. Then it came again, exactly 3 beats, like a redstone clock set to a smug rhythm. I raised my shield, knowing how ridiculous that is against sound, and edged toward the door. Through the window I saw nothing but my porch torch and the white tilled rows of wheat. The knock sounded a third time, and the painting updated in my peripheral vision. The silhouette now fully inside the doorway in the picture, its shoulder brushing the barrel, its head turned toward the bed. I didn't look straight at it. I stared at the item frame instead and removed my sword, then put nothing in its place. In the painting, the object on the floor disappeared, leaving only my body. I thought, deny it props, deny it stage direction. I stepped into the corner so I could see door, trapdoor, window, painting all at once, and waited for the knock again. When it came, it wasn't at the door. It came from behind the painting, the kind of soft, hollow thud you get when you touch the back of a stretched canvas. The torch beside it dimmed for a heartbeat. The clock within the image hit midnight, the icon switching from sun to moon with that tiny pixel click. My bed outside the cabin, my emergency spawn point, blinked out of existence in the picture. I hadn't put a bed outside in the painting's world. There was only this room. I yanked the painting down and ran it across the cabin like a shield, because if it wanted to be a doorway, then I was going to point the doorway away from me. I set it against the floor, angled, so the picture faced the underside of the bed, as if pressing its gaze into the dark. The canvas still showed the door scene. It did not care. I placed blocks in the doorway, cobblestone, then deep slate, then spruce, click, 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 until the frame was sealed 3 blocks thick. I did the same to the windows, building a little stone coffin around the cabin's openings, suffocating all views until the only light came from my torches. It was ugly. It was decisive. For 5 seconds there was silence so pure I could hear the furnace settle. Then a block broke in the doorway, not the outermost one, but the middle one, as if hands I couldn't see had reached through complete rock and decided the second layer was the correct layer to remove. I patched it. The second layer broke again, 1 block to the left this time, as if whatever was outside could see me place replacements and wanted to prove it could adapt. In the painting, the silhouette had moved to the side of the bed, its head tilted toward the floor, looking at a spot that formed a perfect crosshair over where my heart would be if Minecraft tracked that. I whispered no, even though voice chat wasn't on, and held my shield against empty air until my knuckles in the real world hurt. I don't know why I decided the answer was redstone, except redstone feels like control, and control felt like the thing I was bleeding. I pulled out dust, a lever, some sticky pistons from a chest I hadn't meant to craft them for yet, and I ran a quick, ugly circuit right across the floor. Lever near the bed, pistons facing the door, cobble blocks ready to slam in and out. I wasn't trying to crush anything. I just wanted to feel the thunk of the world doing what I told it to do. The lever flipped. The pistons extended with a satisfyingly stupid noise. The second layer of my patched doorway was once again replaced by my own hand, and for a breath I felt taller. The painting updated as if in sympathy, angle widening to catch the whole front wall, and for the first time I noticed a detail I'd missed in all my panic. A sliver of reflection on the floorboards in the picture, a soft shine I didn't have in my cabin because I'd never waxed them, because floors in Minecraft don't shine. In the canvas they did, like the room had been polished to a mirror. In that reflection the silhouette was sharper than in the room's air, edges crisp, the outline of a head that wasn't quite a player head, just a touch too long, crowned with the faintest pixels of hair, leaves, a halo of untextured fuzz, like chunks that never fully loaded. I stared until my eyes watered, and when I blinked, the reflection smiled without a mouth. I backed into the bedpost and sat, shield still raised, while my brain tried to reboot. The simplest plan: break the bed, move the bed farther, put distance between me and the place the painting wanted me to lie. I took it up and placed it on the opposite wall, under the storage loft I'd crammed into the rafters. I right-clicked set spawn because old habits are stronger than fear, then did something I'd mocked YouTubers for doing. I built a tiny panic chamber right there, obsidian ring 4 blocks wide, roofed, a cramped cube with a 1-block slit to peek through. I crawled in with my shield and bucket and crouched so low my fingers hurt. The obsidian didn't make me safe, but it made me stubborn. I lifted the painting with 2 taps and set it where I could see it through the slit, like I was interrogating it now. It cooperated too well. The canvas showed my new bed location. The death pose had shifted, now tucked under the storage loft. My legs curled like I'd tried to fold into the crawl space. The clock still sat at midnight. The reflection on the floor was clearer, and in it the knot player's feet were visible. Not boots, not shoes, not hooves. A flat, textureless plane, the kind you see when a mob model hasn't loaded its layer. It stood in the reflection a few steps from my obsidian box, as though the floor world knew where I really hid. I flicked the lever on my piston gate once more, just to hear something dumb and mechanical and mortal. The clack echoed. The second layer of the doorway broke again, this time with the exact delay between my lever flick and the piston's thud, like whoever listened outside was learning my rhythm. I decided I needed an ally, even a fragile one. Snow lay on the spruce ridge beyond the wheat, and if I couldn't reach it physically, I could at least conjure something from what I had. I hauled a chest open, grabbed carved pumpkins, sifted for snowballs. Nothing. Of course I hadn't stocked snow. Plan B, iron. I had enough ingots to shape a golem if I sacrificed the anvil fund. In 3 frantic crafts, I had 4 iron blocks and a carved pumpkin in my hotbar. I cleared a 2x2 square in the middle of the cabin and stacked the tea as neat as ritual, then set the pumpkin on top and stepped back like I was lighting TNT. The iron golem unfolded from nowhere with that gentle arm stretch they do, bonking his head on my loft and turning as if he'd been here all along and just remembered to stand up. Relief shot through me in a stupid wave. "Hey, big guy," I said to an entity without ears, and he hummed soft and low, the sound that has always felt like a temple breathing. He turned toward the door and lifted a hand, not in attack, but in a slow, inquisitive reach, like he could feel the same wrongness I did. The painting updated. In it, the iron golem stood where mine stood, but his chest had a hairline crack, as if something had split him along a seam you never see. He looked down at me in the picture with eyes I couldn't see in real life, and his shadow in the reflected floor wasn't attached to his feet. It pointed toward the bed. I gave the golem a name in my head, because naming makes things harder to lose. Forge, I decided, and tossed him a daisy so I'd remember. He didn't take it. It fell through his hitbox and bounced under the barrel, but it made me smile. Forge moved to the sealed doorway and stood, a mute bouncer at the club of my panic. He sniffed at the invisible block I could not break, and then, with a motion I've never seen an iron golem perform in any vanilla or modded footage, he leaned, not the lazy sway they do, a deliberate press like testing a pane of glass. The air where the doorway should be pushed back with a shimmer you can't render in Minecraft, and yet I saw it. A ripple only visible if you stop blinking. Forge recoiled as if something shocked him. The painting flashed white for a single frame, the way the screen does when you take damage, and then returned. Forge in it now 2 steps back, a sliver missing from one shoulder like a bite out of a sandwich. I whispered, "No, no, no," and checked Forge's health with a hit. He didn't aggro. It registered, but the bar didn't appear. It's like the game refused to quantify him. He turned his head to me, then to the bed, and then, insultingly gently, he nudged my shield with his knuckles toward the painting, as if telling me that was the only thing in the room worth blocking. I needed proof that what I was seeing wasn't just a feedback loop inside my skull. So I crafted a cartography table from spare paper and planks, dug through a chest for an empty map, and clicked to initialize it right on the cabin floor. The parchment filled with the familiar top-down of my spruce box. The dock, the wheat patch, the little path to the ridge. I held it up, mapping hands steady, and watched the white player marker in the center flicker. The tiniest noise of static at its edges. A fizz you only hear when you record at too high a gain. On the map, the cabin's door was drawn open even though it wasn't. On the map, a second white marker blinked at the threshold with no name tag, no label, like a ghost of me that had never chosen a username. My breath stuttered. I stepped right. The dot stepped right. The other dot didn't move. I put the map on the cartography table to lock it in. Clicked. Paper flared, lines fixed. And now the second dot was permanent, a nail on the page hammered into the doorway. The painting leaned toward me from its frame. Ridiculous, but that's how it felt. And the floor reflection showed the map lying on the table and the second dot on it turning red. I grabbed the map back so fast I smeared my palm on the edge of my desk in the real world. I spoke to it because silence had made me stupid. "What do you want?" I asked the air like an idiot. Not in chat, not into a mic, not with any system in the world that would carry that sound beyond my room. The knock came again, gentle, precise, 3 beats, not at the door or the painting this time, but from the floor between them, as if answering, as if saying, "Here." I crouched and watched the planks. Lines of spruce ran calm and unbroken. I swapped to a shovel just to switch the rhythm in my hand, and then I broke the floor where the knock had tapped, because I am a human animal, and when something taps, you pry the tile. The block popped. Beneath was not my basement ladder, not my cramped stone room, not even dirt. It was the glossy black of the painting's reflection come to life, a 2x2 pane of perfect shine into which my torchlight sank and never returned. Forge stepped sideways, avoiding it with ancient intelligence, and the iron golem's reflection in the hole did not match him. It lagged a fraction and then looked up at me from the wrong angle, as if it stood in a mirror world where my cabin was rotated 90 degrees. I set the plank back immediately, wood clicking over gloss with the dread of sealing a coffin. The knock did not come again. The painting, out of pity or boredom, pivoted to show the bed angle once more. My predicted body slightly closer to where my legs are. The clock ticked, 1 pixel maybe, and in the corner of the canvas, tiny and almost missed, a message blinked the way server messages do. Player joined the game. I have never set this world to LAN. I have never opened ports, invited friends, or named it anything anyone else would even guess. Still, there it was in the painting's corner, that exact bracketed syntax, the font too familiar to be a hallucination. I waited for a name, for a colon, for some dumb hi, praying it would be Dylan or Ellie or anyone with bones and a breath I know. Nothing after the line. The chat in my actual you, I remained empty. In the painting, another message appeared a heartbeat later. Player left the game. The silhouette in the doorway flattened like paper laid on a table, and when it rose again, it had something in its hand. The pixels were too small to pass until it turned its wrist in that crisp, precise way paintings shouldn't be able to do. And then I saw it. A compass, but the needle didn't spin to world spawn. It pivoted toward me the way a cat's ear tilts toward footsteps in another room. Forge positioned himself between me and the painting with a gentleness that made me want to cry, reaching one hand down as if to scoop me up like a chicken. I slid sideways instead and placed lava, just a single block, between the bed and the painting. Fire danced up, smoke particles popped. If anything tried to cross that, it would have to acknowledge the rules I knew. The painting did not burn. In it, the lava twisted into a flat red strip like cloth, and the reflection of the flames licked the ceiling without touching it. I made a decision that felt like tearing duct tape off my own mouth. I would sleep. Not to skip night, not to hand the clock to whatever watched, just to force a state change, to shove the game into a saved tick that might break a loop. I moved the bed again, right into my obsidian cube, jammed it so tight the pillow overlapped the block. Forge huffed disapproval, but didn't block me. I looked at the painting, at the death pose it held ready like a stage direction, and I refused to memorize it. "If you want to show me dying," I said, "you can watch me live." Then I right-clicked the bed and let the screen fade. Sleep in Minecraft is a blink, a black today transition, a cut. But this time, there was a half-second extra, a gap you feel more than see, And in that gap I heard footsteps crossing my floor, not in my left or right headphone, but directly behind my eyes, the kind of echo you get in a hollow log. When the screen brightened to morning, my hunger bar had lost half a shank. My inventory had shifted one slot, bread and torches swapping places, as if someone with my hands had reached into my pockets while I was out. Forge stood in the doorway spot, facing me now, and in his iron chest, a crack spiderwebbed faintly that I could finally see in my world instead of only in the painting. The canvas displayed daylight too, but the clock on its wall still pointed to midnight, as if it had been fixed there with nails. Day should have made me brave. It made me efficient. I ate, shoved the cartography table, furnace and barrels into my inventory in a panicked sweep, then began tearing the cabin down from the inside, roof first, then rafters, then one entire wall, all the while keeping the obsidian cube around the bed as my last redoubt. If I couldn't leave through the door, I would unhouse the house and walk out through the absence. Planks popped, stairs dismantled, the sky opened like a lung finally pulling air. Forge worked beside me without logic, lifting nothing but making space with his body, as if his mass pressed an outline into the wrongness in the door. When I'd cut a swath wide enough to step into the daylight, I took 3 bold strides into the yard and felt the sun on my back in the way you feel good code compile. It held. The invisible block did not follow me. The wheat moved in the wind, which of course it doesn't do, and I forgave the game for lying because it felt like relief. I pivoted to look at what remained of the cabin, 2 walls, my bed in its obsidian, Forge in the gap, and saw, with the clarity survival mode gives, that I had only moved the frame of the painting outward, because there it was, still on a wall, stubbornly fixed mid-air to nothing, hovering exactly where it had hung inside, showing me the same room now sketched by lines of daylight. In the painting's world, the cabin was intact. In mine, it was ribs and smoke. Running would have been the smart play, set a new base at a new coordinate and leave this haunted bracket of chunks to unload forever. But a thread had been tied between me and this spot, and pulling away would only make it cut deeper. I stepped back into the skeleton of my home and faced the hovering canvas point blank, the way you stand in front of a mirror until you see the trick your face plays. The picture of my death had inched forward again, a knuckle closer to the pillow, stubborn as a tide. I lifted my pick and slammed it into the painting with every click I had left in me. It popped, of course it popped, and then it didn't land. It hung for a fraction and then slid, not down but sideways, like someone standing to my left had caught it in the air and was offering it back, palms up. I couldn't see the hands. I only saw the canvas tilt toward me at a courteous angle, an invitation to hang it again, to put it back where it belonged, to finish the scene it had started. Forge groaned, an iron hinge in prayer, and set one foot between me and the offered frame. The compass in the picture swung one last time and leveled its needle at my chest. The line held so perfectly straight, it looked like a command prompt's cursor waiting for a single key. I closed my eyes and took a breath that smelled like spruce and ghost fire and decided the only way to unwrite a script was to put a different line in its place. I didn't take the painting. Instead, I reached into my hotbar and pulled out something so mundane it felt almost insulting to the moment. A plain oak sign. No enchantments, no glow ink, just 3 words carved in blocky letters, "Not today." I placed it between myself and the floating frame like it could hold back the tide. The click of it setting down was the most normal sound I'd heard in hours, and for a moment the painting hesitated. It was subtle, but I swear the pixels of my body in the image seemed to freeze mid-motion, the predicted arm not quite reaching the floor. Forge stood there beside me, silent, his huge shadow stretching over the sign. In that stillness I thought maybe, just maybe, the story was over, that the sign was enough of a break in the loop to make the thing lose interest. Then The text on the sign in the real world flickered. Just for a fraction of a second, the letters warped and rearranged into something unreadable, jagged symbols that didn't exist in Minecraft's font set, before snapping back to "not today." But in the painting, the sign didn't say those words anymore. It said my real, actual username. And under it a new line appeared. Today. The air inside the ruined cabin seemed heavier now, like every particle was charged, like lightning was about to strike but never would. My hunger bar ticked down again, even though I hadn't moved. Forge turned his head toward me, slow and deliberate, and stepped closer until I could hear the faint clink of metal on metal in his joints. He didn't push me away or block me from the painting. He just stood there, eyes locked on mine, as if asking if I was really ready for whatever came next. I glanced at my inventory. Tools fine, armor worn but serviceable, food low, no totems. I had no reason to fight whatever this was, except one. If I left, this thing might not stay in this chunk. I turned to the painting and stepped forward. The closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The image wasn't static anymore. My death pose in the scene was shifting slightly, tiny jerks of the head, twitches in the hand, like the figure inside was trying to get up, but couldn't. And in the floor reflection, the silhouette was standing fully upright now, closer to the canvas's camera than the room it depicted, like it had stepped forward to greet me. I placed my hand on the painting, not to break it, not to move it, but just to touch. The moment my crosshair hit its hitbox, the screen snapped black. Not the kind of black you get from a fade or sleep, but an absence. No hotbar, no chat, no UI. Then slowly, light bled in from the edges, and I was standing in the exact same cabin. Only everything was reversed. The bed was on the wrong side. The barrels flipped. Forge wasn't there. The door was wide open to a forest I didn't recognize. Same spruce trunks but too tall, stretching into fog that hid the tops. I stepped to the doorway, and the crunch of my boots on the floor sounded strange, hollow, like walking on glass. Outside, the world was still. No sheep bleating, no leaves rustling, no ambient hum. Just silence, and the faint glow of a moon locked in place high above, as if the clock here had only one time and would never change. Behind me, in the cabin, the painting still hung on the wall, but this time it showed the real world. My unfinished cabin skeleton, Forge pacing in front of where the painting should be, his eyes scanning for me. The realization hit like a splash of ice water. I hadn't been looking at my death in the painting. I'd been looking at a doorway. The body on the floor was just me after stepping through. And now I was inside. I backed away from the door and scanned the reversed room for anything useful. My inventory was stripped bare, hotbar empty, except for the oak sign I'd placed earlier, still reading "Not Today" in my world's font. I clicked to pick it up. The second it entered my hand, a new line appeared beneath the words, in smaller, greyer text. "You already did." I dropped it, like it burned. The sound of it hitting the floor was wrong, too sharp, like breaking bone. That was when I heard it. Footsteps on the roof, slow and deliberate, circling directly above me. I edged toward the barrels. Empty, of course, and pressed myself into the corner, eyes locked on the trapdoor to the attic loft. The footsteps above stopped. Then, without any animation or hinge sound, the trapdoor swung open. A face peered down. It wasn't the silhouette, it was my face, my skin, but the eyes were empty black, and the mouth didn't move even as I heard my own voice say, from nowhere and everywhere at once, "You finally came home." I bolted for the open door, not caring what was outside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world warped. The forest was gone. The wheat patch was gone. I stood in a void of floating block fragments, pieces of my cabin, shards of stone, slivers of leaves, all suspended in mid-air like a half-rendered dream. and far off, across the void, was another cabin, perfect and whole. Through its window, I saw Forge, still guarding the painting, still waiting. The void wasn't empty in the way people talk about blank space. It had texture, a grain, like the underside of a map, where paper fibers lift in the light, and as I stepped forward, the blocks beneath me arranged themselves into a narrow path, not built so much as decided. Planks sliding in from the edges of nothing to meet the soles of my boots right before I place my weight. I didn't trust it, but I walked, because standing still felt like letting the painting close over me. The air had that muffled quality of underwater audio, footsteps thudding without echo, inventory clicks swallowed as soon as I made them. Off to my left, a chunk of birch forest drifted slowly, trees sliced clean at Y levels, leaves pausing mid-decay. To the right, a top half of a shipwreck rotated lazily, water frozen in sheets around it like hanging glass. Far ahead, the complete cabin, my cabin from the real world, floated with steadiness that made everything else look feverish. In its window, Forge paced, a gentle rhythm I could recognize by motion alone, even from this distance. He looked like hope given a hitbox. I tested the path because I'd learned to distrust kindness from worlds like this. I placed a block of cobble from a stack that shouldn't have followed me here, and it hung, obediently, unglitched. I broke it and it popped into the void, then rebounded into my hand with a soft snap like elastic finding home. I risked a sprint jump to the next section. The bridge extended just in time, planks meeting me mid-flight, a cooperative magic that set my teeth on edge because it implied something was actively keeping me aloft. I slowed to a careful walk. Near the shipwreck fragment, sound changed. It wasn't wind exactly, it was the faint, grainy hush of record static. A music disc lay embedded in the air, warped, undeclared. When I reached for it, my crosshair slid off, unable to select, and the static grew a fraction louder, like the world cleared its throat to speak, but hadn't found the words. I kept moving, eyes on the cabin, a point of correctness in a field of almosts. Halfway across, the path bent without turning. That's the only way to describe it. I walked straight, but the bridge decided a new vector, and my body went with it, as if the world had put its hand at the small of my back and guided. The cabin stayed centered. Everything else rotated around a point I couldn't see, a smooth pivot that didn't respect coordinates. I passed a chunk of stronghold hallway with the portal room cut off. Lava frozen in a copper-orange curtain that didn't drip. Silverfish sat halfway out of stone, like ideas not fully thought. They didn't move. Their eyes tracked me with the lazy interest of paintings. In the distance below, I spotted a slice of the overworld at night. Just one row of ground, grass blades sharp, a single skeleton stuck mid-drawer of its bow, arrow at permanent half-pull, string a straight line that would never release. It watched me without seeing, a statue of intention. The bridge shifted again, ensuring I'd never pass close enough to touch any of it. When the cabin finally loomed near, its gravity pulled at my ribs in a way gravity doesn't. The window where Forge had been pacing was empty for a breath, and my stomach dropped, but then he stepped back into view carrying something huge and square I couldn't place until he put it down against the inside wall, and the surface caught the light. It was a block of raw iron, not ingots, not processed, the kind you only see underground, all banded texture like a sedimentary heart. He was building something in there. I couldn't hear his movements, but I could read purpose in them. The way he set iron with a tenderness that should be impossible for a mob with no fingers. I raised a hand before I remembered he couldn't see me. Not like this. Then the path ahead stopped. Not a missing block, a hard edge. Beyond it was the cabin, close enough to throw a snowball at, and then a clean gap of 2 blocks of nothing that refused to accept placed items. I tried cobble. It hung for a heartbeat and then fell away, shrinking into a pixel and popping like it had never existed. I crouched at the brink, toes over the lip, and looked down for the first time since I'd started across. There was no depth, just a kind of dark that wanted to be depth but didn't possess the math. I tested water from my bucket. It poured, spiraled outward, and then flattened into a bright sheet, as if a hand had pressed it between glass panes. The cabin, meanwhile, waited with patience that bordered on rude. In its window, a second shape walked into frame beside Forge, taller, thinner, a slice of presence. For a second I thought it was my mirror, the not me I'd seen in the painting, but then it turned its head, and instead of a player's profile, I caught a long, soft edge, a lantern, floating, the very lantern that had moved in my real cabin hours ago. Forge had secured it to a chain at the roofline. It drifted forward against nothing and hung there, casting a small, warm puddle on the floor like a hearth in a cold church. He was marking the exact square opposite my position, as if to say, "Here is where you belong on this side." The jump was impossible, and therefore the only option. I backed up exactly 5 blocks, because superstition is just math wearing a cape, ate a piece of bread I didn't remember having because ritual needed fuel, and sprinted. In that half-second airtime, the bridge performed its trick. 2 planks slid under me where there hadn't been any, just long enough for my front foot to find purchase, and then withdrew like embarrassed servants. I hit the cabin's threshold with my shoulder, stumbled, and caught myself on the frame. The doorway felt solid, real, the kind of resistance your bones recognize from every house you've ever leaned into. When I looked up, Forge was at the inner door, and for the first time since I'd crafted him, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't just glow, relief, deep and old, a ship's bell answering your return. He stepped aside and let me in like a doorman who had vowed to protect a single guest and now had proof the guest still existed. Inside, the cabin was correct, not perfect. It bore the scuffs of my survival laziness, a block placed wrong and never fixed behind a barrel, a ladder that squeaked in a way ladders don't, the micro-stutter of a torch particle. But it was the closest to reality I'd felt since touching the painting. The raw iron forge had moved, was set into a square, around the place where the painting should be, a frame of ore as if he'd built a greater node to ground a lightning strike. In its center, instead of canvas, the air rippled faintly like heat over sand. When I stepped closer, the hair on my arms lifted. This was the seam. Forge turned his head toward the ripple and placed his palm against it. His hand sank an inch and stopped, resisting like taut fabric. He looked at me, waited. There was something like a question in the tilt of his head. "Are you ready to try?" I tested it with the back of my shield. The surface flexed and held, a membrane stretched over the absence. When I pushed harder, the membrane thinned until I could just make out the other room through it. The ruined, stripped skeleton of the real cabin, daylight pouring through rafters, my obsidian cube half dismantled, the hovering canvas in the place it refused to leave. I could see my sign too, the "Not Today" planted at an angle, letters stubborn. I withdrew the pressure and the view fogged again, sealing like skin. Forge stepped to the crafting table, lifted a single iron ingot from a chest. Where had he found it? And with gestures I'd never seen, bent it into a crude needle. No recipe, no interface, just intention. He handed it to me. It landed in my hotbar with the clink of something homemade, and at once I understood. Stitch, don't smash. Close the tear on your terms. I pressed the needle to the membrane and drew it across slowly. The surface puckered, not like cloth exactly, more like dragging a stylus through surface tension. When I reached the far corner, the line held. I made another pass perpendicular, across, a seam. The room beyond shifted in clarity, the picture of the real-world cabin aligning a fraction tighter, as if each stroke made the two versions agree on a single truth. Behind me, a sound rose, record static again but clearer, resolving into the faintest rhythm I knew too well. The sound at the beginning of music discs right before the melody, the heartbeat of the world when it's about to decide. I kept stitching, line after careful line. Forge's presence at my shoulder a steadying weight until the membrane became a window with a hinge. All it needed was a push. I braced with my shoulder and shoved. The seam gave like ice under a boot and then swung wide, and I fell through into my real cabin with the gracelessness of someone climbing out of a second-story window. I landed half in my obsidian cube, half on the rug, breath knocked out of me. Daylight flooded everything. The painting hung exactly where it had before, fresh as a wound and just as stubborn, but the image had changed. Instead of my body in a death pose, it showed the empty void cabin, Forge standing alone next to the still open seam I'd just created. He looked smaller through that distance, a statue in a snow globe. He lifted one massive hand and placed it against the interior of his frame. Instinct made me mirror him, palm to palm through glass. The membrane bucked between us like a heartbeat against a hand, and then, gently, it stuck, the way an electrostatic balloon finds a wall. The compass in the painting rotated a last slow degree and then stopped dead on a bearing that pointed not at me, but at the seam's hinge, like a needle finally content with north. I took the sign that still read "Not Today" and planted it under the painting, not as a dare now, but as a label, as if naming stabilized the squares it sat on. Beneath the words I added a second line, hand shaky, "Hold fast." The room felt taller. Outside, a breeze disturbed wheat that did not move, and I forgave it for pretending. I turned to Forge in the painting, the only place he could live now, and said, because saying mattered, "Thank you." He inclined his head, almost a bow, then turned and faced the void cabin's door like a sentry who accepts a post without end. I wanted to bring him through, to craft another frame, to cheat the game's rules, but in my chest I knew that some guardians only guard because they stand on the threshold itself. Pull them away and the threshold goes wild. I started rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, each plank placed with the patience people leave for late nights and long winters. The roof ribs, the spruce stairs, the rail above the trapdoor, the window panes taken down and set back with the satisfaction of setting bones. I felt watched, but not hunted. A difference in posture. The painting stayed where it was, quiet as a window at night. Every so often, I'd glance and catch Forge patrolling, a loop of steady distance in a world that could not count, and calm would return to my hands. When the roof was back and the shadows fell across the floor in the old ways, I went to the item frame and hung my sword again. In the painting, the floor reflection showed it too, an echo correct to the notch, a rhyme across worlds instead of a threat. Night came the honest way this time, without tricks. The clock on my wall, one I crafted with a laugh and a handful of gold, finally, turned at the exact pace my chest could handle. I lit the furnace not to smelt, but to hear it purr. I fed Forge a daisy through the frame out of reflex. It slid down the membrane and stuck there, pressed flat like a flower between book pages, a small sun pinned to the seam. He looked at it and I swear stood a little straighter. When the first 3 knocks came, they were in the correct place, at the actual door, polite as a villager. I stood, shield raised, and breathed twice, and then I opened the door. Outside stood no silhouette, no mirror, just a skeleton that had wandered from the ridge, its bow at its hip, confused by the new path of fences I'd built. I dispatched it with a tired swing and felt the world register that as truth. Bones clicked on the porch, arrows stuck in the post. Ordinary things felt like gifts. I closed up and went to sleep with my bed under the loft, not in the obsidian cube, which I dismantled and stacked in a corner because rituals can retire with honor. In the half-second of sleep's darkness, I heard nothing uninvited, and in the morning my inventory was exactly where I'd left it. The painting remained a painting. The door opened on the first try. Days passed, measured by small chores. I farmed. I fished. I mined carefully, leaving torches placed at exact intervals that would make a future me smile, when I'd forgotten that once lines had saved me. I visited the painting each evening before dusk and lifted a hand. Forge would mirror me, and sometimes, if I stood very still, I could feel a faint pressure through the seam hum against my palm, a heartbeat made of iron and will. The compass inside the painting never spun again. It sat quiet and observant, a needle content with a job completed. Once, when the wind made the wheat pretend to sway, I caught a glint in the painting that looked like a second iron figure far down the void path, and I chose to believe that wasn't loneliness, but company. A golem walking a perimeter forge had set, a world finding more guardians. One last test remained, not because I doubted the piece, but because I wanted to understand it. I placed a fresh canvas beside the haunted one and clicked through until the old dojo scene appeared. I let it hang there a day, then another. On the third night, as the furnace hummed and the lanterns pooled light, I looked up and saw that the new painting had quietly, gently changed to a view of my cabin. Not the death angle, not the door, just the window with the wheat beyond. The handmade fence line, the lantern forge had taught me to respect by loving it. No body, no clock stuck at midnight. Just a still life of a place survived. I left it, a reminder that even a mechanic that once felt like a threat can learn new tricks if you give it a different scene to hold. I don't pretend the world was fixed. Some nights, when the moon sits just so, the trapdoor to the loft creaks without moving, and a pair of footsteps circles on the roof, as if checking a roof line that only exists on the other side. When that happens, I sit on the bed and talk the way people talk to old houses, out loud, ordinary, almost bored. I tell the cabin about the day's mining, about a salmon that got away, about how many seeds a single row of wheat can make if you believe in tidy math. The footsteps pass on. In the painting, Forge makes a wide circuit, nodding once when he reaches the seam. Routine is a ritual too, and sometimes it is the best kind. Eventually I wrote a sign for the dock, because names matter, and stories end better when they remember to title themselves. I placed it facing the water where no one would read it but me and the fish and the things that come from paintings. Cabin confession number 3. The painting showed my death. Under it, because I'd learned that jokes are also a kind of ward, I added it didn't stick. The letters made me grin in the dark. As the sun dropped behind the spruce, a final glint winked from the canvas inside, Forge settling at his post for the night, and I let the cabin creak in the quiet, the way wood does when it forgives a storm for passing through. On the last night I'll tell you about, I sat with my back to the wall under the painting and watched the room breathe. The lantern swayed a fraction, the furnace exhaled, wheat pretended to move the way it always will. I pressed my palm flat to the seam and held it there until my heartbeat and the faint iron hum matched. And then, because I'm stubborn and superstitious and alive, I whispered the same 2 words I'd nailed into the floor the day this started. Not a dare, a promise to myself. Not today. In the painting, Forge lifted his hand in the same gesture and tapped the seam twice, then let it rest. A knock came at the door. 3 soft beats, polite as a neighbor, and I opened it to the plainest thing in the world. Night air, stars, and a skeleton too far away to shoot true. I closed the door, set my sword in the frame where it belonged, and went to bed. The clock on the wall turned past midnight and kept going. The painting, for once, showed nothing I didn't already know. If you made it through the night, you're officially part of the cabin now. Drop a comment and tell me what you think the painting really was, and if you've ever had something in Minecraft feel like it was watching you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more cabin confessions, and I'll see you in the next story, if the door opens.